What up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. And in this video, we're going to focus on some really bad NFL teams, particularly the worst NFL teams of the 2000s. Let's rip it. Number 5, the 2005 Houston Texans. These guys just could not get right on the football field. They finished with a record of 2 wins against 14 losses. Their defense was dead last, giving up 27 points a game, and they only had 7 interceptions for the entire season. The offensive line, an absolute train wreck, with David Carr as the starter, having a very pedestrian 14 touchdowns against 11 interceptions. He was sacked 68 times, and he was hit by unofficial records more than 100 additional times. This offensive line was abysmal. On a bright point, future Hall of Famer Andre Johnson was on this team, but even he didn't have a very good year. It was very early in his career. It took him 114 targets to get 63 catches for 688 yards with only 2 touchdowns. Number 4, the 2006 Oakland Raiders. The 2006 Oakland Raiders decided to bring Oakland Raider great Art Shell back for a second time to coach the team, and it just didn't work out. First, let's talk about the positive. The defense was decent, kind of in the middle of the pack of the league, at 18th out of 32 teams, giving up about 21 points per game, and they did have 18 interceptions and 34 sacks, so they were somewhat productive. On offense, these guys had the flu. 10.5 points per game, dead last in the league. Several quarterbacks started throughout the season, including Andrew Walter with 3 touchdowns and 13 interceptions, along with Aaron Brooks and others. They totaled 7 touchdowns passing for the entire season against 24 interceptions. The leading rusher was Justin Vargas, and he had 659 yards. Ugh, they were awful. Number 3, the 2001 Carolina Panthers. The 2001 Carolina Panthers decided that they were going to bring former San Francisco 49er coaching great George Seifert across the country to help to give their franchise a boost. But it didn't work. Coming in with 1 win and 15 losses on the season, they were never, ever a threat to do anything, averaging just under 16 points a game while giving up about 26 points a game. Most of their games were over early in the second half, and that's being very kind. Chris Winkie, former Florida State star, was the starting quarterback. They drafted him as a rookie, even though he was almost 30 years old. He finished off with 11 touchdowns and 19 interceptions on the season. Guys, this team punted 93 times in one NFL season. 93 times. Their leading rusher was a guy named Richard Huntley that had 665 yards rushing. The bright spot? Steve Smith was on that team, and he did crack 1,000 yards just barely, coming in at 1,002 yards. Number 2, the 2009 St. Louis Rams. The 2009 St. Louis Rams, led by Steve Spagnuolo, finished the season with 1 win and 15 losses. And on offense, they were awful. 10.9 points per game. On defense, they were equally awful, giving up 27.3 points per game. They had 4 quarterbacks start throughout the season, including Mark Bulger, and between all of them, they were able to total 12 touchdowns passing as a group. The bright spot on this team was Steven Jackson. The very durable tailback somehow found a way to get 1,400 yards with this awful cast around him. The number 1 team, this should become as no surprise to anyone. It is the 2008 Detroit Lions. They were perfect, guys. They were perfect at being bad. 0 wins versus 16 losses. Very respected defensive coach Rod Marinelli's defense gave up 32.3 points per game, dead last in the league. For the entire season, they were able to muster 4 interceptions as a defense. Absolutely pitiful. 5 different quarterbacks started throughout the season, including Dan Orlovsky. Yeah, the same Dan Orlovsky that you see now on ESPN was seen, pictured here, running out of bounds for a safety for the Detroit Lions that went 0-16. Other quarterbacks of note included Dante Culpepper and John Kitna, and all of these guys together threw for under 3,000 yards and only 18 touchdowns on the entire season. Somehow, running back Kevin Johnson had a very respectable season at 976 yards with 8 touchdowns and averaged 4.1 yards per carry. Maybe they should have given it to him more. But here's the super silver lining. The Detroit Lions are definitely seeing a resurgence now, and a lot of that is focused around their head coach, Dan Campbell. Guess what? Dan Campbell was on the 2008 Detroit Lions team that went 0-16. Well, maybe that's where some of that resiliency in him comes from, because he's definitely seen the bottom, and maybe those guys will actually make it to the top. And although I'm not a Detroit Lions fan, I do root for Dan Campbell. So there it is. 2008 Detroit Lions, they were the worst, but from it came what may end up being the best thing that happened to that franchise in forever, being Dan Campbell. So there it is, guys. The worst teams in the NFL of the 2000s. Let me know what you thought of that list. Is there teams that should have been on there? Is there teams that you think should not be on here that are on here now? I would love to read and respond to all your comments. So make sure you put them in the comments section. And on that note, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share. And I will talk to you in the next video.